Hi all, and welcome to our webinar on Workday. We are Cloud Elements, and speaking here today, we have myself, Kelsey Stevenson. I am a lead product manager focusing primarily on Elements and our Element Builder. And I'll turn it over to Dave Honan, who's our Director of Technical Marketing.
Cool. Hello, everyone, and I'll be doing the major part of the demo today. And I'm super excited to kind of go through what we've done with the Workday element, how we've constructed it so far, and where it's going in the future.
Yes. So just a couple housekeeping tips that we'll go through before we jump in. So slides and recording will be shared after the webinar. We will use the GoToWebinar console to ask any questions, and we will answer all questions at the end.
Okay, so this is where I take over. So I put this slide in here because I really want to kind of cover, for those that may not be experts in Cloud Elements and what our platform can provide. But if you look at an integration a lot like this image here, where you've got all kinds of different endpoints represented by maybe these circles with, say, Shopify or HubSpot or Stripe or others. Without a platform that's specifically designed to integrate and make, and have pre-built integrations into those endpoints, each one of those is really not only an island of data, but a lot more unique as well. So you end up doing custom point-to-point integrations. And that's really the essence of what Cloud Elements provides in our elements themselves, where we look to kind of normalize those and make a lot more short work out of getting integrated into the different endpoints. And that's really where we introduce this notion of the element catalog. And the way to think of an element in our platform is really it's an integration platform in itself that's specialized for its own given endpoint. So if you have something like a bullhorn or Box or others, you can look at the element and see that it's always going to expose a uniform set of APIs regardless of what the endpoint is. And so that's really the essence of the elements, is to remove that dependency on these direct custom endpoints. And really the elements also are categorized, and so you can begin to look at things like ERPs and human capital and billing and others. And I thought it might be good to go through a bit of an anatomy of an element. So for those of you that haven't used elements, then you can see what's in them. For those of you that have used elements in your integrations already, this may be educational to see what else is in there that maybe you could use going forward. And if you look at the left side, we're always normalized to JSON and REST. So what that means is it doesn't matter if the endpoint is like a database, or if it's SOAP or with XML, or even if it's REST or if it's complex REST or whatever, we're always going to change that to a REST API with a JSON payload. And so therefore you only have to learn that one protocol type, but not only that, we're also going to canonicalize and normalize all of those. So the bottom line is you can pick up almost any element out of our catalog and feel pretty comfortable that you're going to understand how to interact with it and make API calls or resource calls to interact with that data, so making it less of an island at the endpoint. Then the next is authentication, and as you know, there's lots of different types. There's OAuth 2, there's OAuth, there's basic, there's even customs, and there's a whole different refresh times and all of that. So when an element is crafted, we actually go in and learn all of those nuances and expose those out into a common set of calls as well. So you can feel comfortable that you're going to be able to authenticate into the endpoint and not have to worry about the endpoint nuances, and they all have them around authentication. The same thing with discovery APIs and custom data. It's often a need in an integration to understand, because every endpoint is more or less customizable when it comes to data. So you can add in contact fields for specialized purposes. You're going to have to be able to, discover that what's there, do they exist, and how do I call those and dynamically pull those. And so each of our elements have discovery APIs. And not all endpoints have those APIs native into their service. And so even the ones that don't, we're able to do those by sampling data endpoints and allowing you to make individual ID calls against data objects so that you can pull those endpoints in and get that data. So that's all been normalized as well. And pagination is another thing that it varies at different endpoints. There's offset, cursor, different types, and so we're going to normalize that as well at the element level. So to you, it looks like every endpoint has a common pagination process. Error handling, same thing. Bulk is another one that not all endpoints support, but you might see it as batch APIs or bulk. They're asynchronous calls, and not all endpoints have those. And even the ones that don't, we mimic that process to allow you to be able to make calls and move data. Your use case might be, hey, I want to pull in a bunch of data, and then I want to work on that and then keep it in sync after that one at a time. Eventing is something that, in addition, we will always return a webhook out of an element, even if the endpoint doesn't support webhooks natively. So we will make up that with each element has an entire polling framework within there that allows you to be able to do that. So in a way, for using a non-real word, we sort of webhookify even endpoints that don't have it through our polling framework. Model schemas and then searching. I'll just jump down to searching for time. So every endpoint searches differently. Some do it as part of a filter within a GET request. Others do it as they have full-on search APIs, etc. So what we'll do is we'll learn what those are and make it and normalize those to an SQL type endpoint. So all of that, you may or may not have already realized, are packed into these mighty little elements, and so those are all the things that we have to consider when we build a new element. And so for the Workday element, we had a lot of things to consider. I'm going to turn this over to Kelsey for this to talk a little bit about the drivers of our Workday element and kind of what motivated us, and then I'll move into actually showing it to you in a demo.
Yeah, so I'll just do kind of a quick overview of the why and really kind of the value drivers for Cloud Elements from a product management perspective to publish the Workday element as a GA element in our integration catalog. So Cloud Elements has had a strategic push into the human capital and ERP market, especially as we know that our customers are trying to target enterprise customers. So Workday itself is the leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for a cloud HCM suite for mid-market and large enterprises. And I think that's really apparent as we look at their customer base and really the reach that they have. They currently support 50% of the Fortune 50 companies and 40% in the Fortune 500 companies. And their CEO gave these numbers in the last quarterly review. He also mentioned that they're hoping to expand those. So it really demonstrates the strategic reach for a lot of our customers within the enterprise space. We've also had over 50 documented requests from prospects and customers for this particular integration. And some of the use cases that we are looking to support that really drive the highest value and where we're starting are hire to retire automation. We see a lot of customers and a lot of movement within that use case. So really managing that master data of employees all the way from onboarding through the talent acquisition process through to retire. We also see some movement in the procure to pay. This is more so in the ERP space, but this is really high value for our customers who are providing automation within that accounts receivable. And Workday is unique in that it is an HCM system, but it does have financial endpoints that complement that accounts receivable automation. So what I mean by that is if you have suppliers or invoices that you're trying to process and you have contract workers that are within Workday, you can use the procure to pay accounts receivable use case to manage those employees or those contractors all the way through to a paid invoice through the contract. So that's where we're seeing a lot of demand within the financial management and human capital management space. And if you have any other questions, please let me know at the end. I'd also like to say that within that Gartner's Magic Quadrant for human capital, mid-market, and large enterprise, the top 3 software vendors there are Workday, SAP, and Oracle. And Cloud Elements now supports all 3 of those elements.
Cool. Okay. Well, and for our Workday element, what we've done is actually tagged it into the ERP category, because it does fit in there with all of the different vertical services that it can produce, but in a way it's dotted lined, at least initially, and categorized in, say, with the human capital side. So those are the areas we focused on first, but more to come as we go. One thing about Workday too is that you will need access to your customers' Workday sandboxes. Workday does not provide a free trial like other services where you can go in and get a trial and be able to hit data and things like that. You're definitely going to have to be a customer of Workday or have access to your customer's Workday sandbox in order to be able to use that. Secondarily, there's a lot of Workday permissions that have to be set. So one of the things that we encountered while we were building this element was that, you know, to work on and to turn on the services at these endpoints, just like any ERP, they're activated and given permissions based on the different service assets that your customers may have to expose for you. So you may have to work with your customer to turn on the needed permissions in order to be able to push or pull data or receive event notifications and things like that. Speaking of events, we have released this element into production without events, because the use cases for the customers that we initially produced this for it did not need events as their initial version 1. However, we are in process with adding events in, which is fantastic. Using the Workday notification processes as well as our polling framework that's in each of the elements, we're able to work on those as we speak. And, you know, there's 1,800 to 2,000 APIs or resources or web service calls that are available in Workday. So there's a lot of them there, and we decided to not just expose certain ones for the use cases that Kelsey went through, but we actually made it so that you could, in this version of the Workday, call all of those. And I'm going to show that how that's done in the demo. So even if we haven't exposed it as an official supported resource in the element, you can still use it using those discovery APIs that I mentioned a minute ago. Okay, so a couple of those notable features, like we mentioned, it's a SOAP web service that you're going to find at Workday. It's very it's a great service. It's just like you'd expect with SOAP. There's a lot of individual calls and a lot of work to get those done. So at Cloud Elements, we always convert and interact at a REST perspective. So I think that's the first notable feature, is that you can now interact with Workday using a REST API. And you know, that definitely fits into our standardization, you know, our standard protocols within our platform. Second is Workday does not support the notion of a bulk movement of data in and out of their endpoint. They don't have native resources for that, but Cloud Elements does. And like I mentioned before, that in this case, it works on the download. We are still working on to the upload part of the bulk, and that'll be documented in the documentation that you can read when you look at it. We will be adding upload at some point, but right now for the initial release, we are only able to download, but you can still use the bulk REST APIs just like any other element in the same type of calls. And then also the discovery APIs. So there's, I think I've got 2,000 resources here. I don't think I actually counted them, so it could be anywhere from 1,800 to 2,000, but we have put in the discovery APIs, being able to actually call and get all of those different services that are available out at that endpoint. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So you can actually construct your own calls as if it was native into the element, which is a pretty cool feature around that discovery side. And this is how it's done. So when you run the get/objects resource that we've put into the element, it will actually, if you tell it to return all, it will actually go and look at the documentation out at Workday, and we'll scrape essentially and grab that documentation and create the list here that you see, and you're able to pick one that you would like. So if you're under staffing and you wanted to get organizations associated with staffing, then you would just take that came back on that get objects, put it into the object name, hit execute, and you'll get that value. So let's go ahead and move directly into the demo. I've actually put together a simple click-through demo to show you how this works end to end. So as you move into the, log into Cloud Elements, into our UI, you'll be on the welcome screen where it starts. If you click on Elements, you're exposing the catalog. This is just a small piece of it. You saw on the slide before that there's over 160 elements that are in there. But the best way to find the Workday one is to just go ahead and search, and you can do that by typing in Workday, and it'll begin to auto search for you and show you the actual element itself. And then you can click on, see the API docs or other things, but let's go ahead and authenticate, which is to connect in. Now remember, everything I'm doing on here, you can also do with API resource calls out of Cloud Elements. So we're 100% API accessible, and that means anything I'm doing in this UI, it just simply calls all the same APIs on the back end. So you don't have to come in and authenticate your customers through our UI. You can do it through API resource calls as well. And this is how it's done. And as you begin to put this together, we'll give you the curl commands to push this through. But when you're creating an instance, which is a credentialed connector into your customer's Workday account, you need to name the actual element instance, put in your host name. This is a generic host name that I've pulled out of the description. I've hidden other tenant information in here so that you can't see it. But one tip or trick is that this -cc isn't super documented. So you might find that if your host name that in your customer's Workday account, if you're having trouble connecting to it, a little tip is to put this -cc on there, and that might give you the access you need. And then when you're ready to go, you can go ahead and click create instance. One notable thing on here is this Workday service is something that's going to be deprecated out of the next instance. So by the time you start to use this, it may actually be gone. Okay, so once you've got a connection now, what we call an instance, and it's to this big customer ABC using Workday, you're going to want to go ahead and take a look at the API REST resources that are exposed. And like I mentioned now, if you look under API docs, you'll see a couple of different tabs here as well. But these are the REST resources that are exposed in the element by default, and starting with the bulk. And then if you scroll down, you can see that the object name ones are where you're going to be able to construct any of those 2,000 plus web service resources by using the get objects call. And then the ones that we expose are organizations, supplier classifications, supplier groups, and invoices and suppliers themselves. So these are the ones that Kelsey mentioned for the use cases that we initially solved for. They're in place. But if we want to run one on the organization side, you click on the resource, you can make sure your instance is selected and hit try it out. And then at this point, you can go ahead and hit execute. Now we pre-populate your user and org secrets and other things that you would do if you were hitting this API directly. And speaking of that, we also give you the curl command. So if you're using this as an embedded, say you have a SaaS app and you're looking for your customers to connect directly into Workday through your application, this is a place where you're going to put the actual sample curl call that's in here as well. And you can see the call that Cloud Elements makes out to the endpoint and gets the results back that come back. Now, a cool tip or trick, I love to give tips or tricks as we're doing these webinars, but you can click on resources and you can edit or change these resources. So if you are not real comfortable with what we've done or you'd like to add your own, you can do that as well. You can add new endpoints, you can change some of the information, and what you do on those, actually extend the element and make it private for those components. But the other thing it allows you to do with this get resources is actually be able to make that same call to get organizations, but instead of doing it with API docs, we're doing it with the resources. And that allows you to actually see what's happening behind the scenes. So if you do a try it out and you execute this, you'll see the call that's made in but you can also see what the call was made into the endpoint. I've blanked out some of the information here, but you can actually see that the SOAP conversion that is done by the element to make that call a SOAP out into the endpoint. So if we go back to our docs now, and we can take a look at the Workday web services. So these are the high-level web services that are available into the endpoint, including things around that resource management. So if we're looking at resource management and we want to come in and say get suppliers or get supplier invoices, we can actually see all of the SOAP specifications around all of that. And then to actually run that now in the element, you can do get objects. So let's say we want to do get supplier invoices that are part of resource management. You can go into this discovery area here called get objects. Okay. When you hit the try it out, you can have it fetch all equals true to do the vendor API, or you can just get false to get the ones that we've exposed. So this is how you're able to call any of those 2,000 web services at the endpoint by getting the object names that are there and then using those to make calls. And so how that's done is you say fetch all equals true, hit execute, and you'll get back the list of all of those 1,800 to 2,000 endpoints that we're actually going out to Workday to grab. And this particular one here, this get organization staffing, is one that we can take a look at. So the way you do that is now that you've got what you want to call that organization staffing, come under object name, click on that, hit try it out, and paste that in here, including the $sign. Okay, so in a way, I'm adding a resource on the fly and building it. So I like to call these sort of build your own. So you're doing a get slash and get organizations $sign staffing as if Cloud Elements had exposed it in the element directly. And when you run that execute, then you'll see that it is making that call and you're actually getting the data back as if we had added that directly into the endpoint. And then if you want to see how the system's doing it, you can go from there. Okay, so that concludes the click-through portion of the demo. And actually, I think it concludes the webinar per se. So if there's questions, now's a good time to, I guess, to enter those in and type those in for us.
Yeah, so throughout the presentation and the Workday, or I'm sorry, the demo, we've had one question come across. So here it is. How do you support the variations in use cases knowing these systems and all ERPs and HCM systems are highly configurable for the end customer, particularly in enterprise customers?
Okay, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I can
Sure.
answer that one. So as Dave mentioned and demoed, we support all APIs supported by Workday with that get objects. So we anticipate that most of our customers who are using this integration will be using that get objects to build custom integrations for their end customers as they have it configured within their systems and using our use cases as the general templates. That's something we see very common across our ERP and human capital solutions. And we'll give one more minute for a couple other questions to come on through. All right, well, that concludes our webinar. We really want to thank everyone who logged in. If you have any follow-up questions, please contact us and we will have someone get in touch with you. We really appreciate your time and happy integrating to Workday.
Thank you.